wonderful quote from my, maybe known to some of you, I'm sorry, of my preferred theologist, Gilbert Keith Chesterton, who, in his novel, The Man Who Was Thursday, ironically proposed to install a, quote, special corps of policemen who are also philosophers. Here is a quote from Chesterton. The work of the philosophical policeman is at once bolder and more subtle than that of the ordinary detective. The ordinary detective goes to coffee houses to arrest thieves. We go to artistic tea parties to detect pessimists. The ordinary detective discovers from a diary that a crime has been committed. We discover from a book of sonnets that a crime will be committed, and so on and so on. Now, this may appear ridiculous, but would thinkers as different as Karl Popper, Theodor Adorno, Emmanuel Levinas not subscribe to a slightly changed version of this idea, where actual political crime is called totalitarianism and the philosophical crime is condensed in the notion of totality? A straight road leads from the philosophical notion of totality to political totalitarianism, so these guys claim. And so the task of philosophical police is to discover from a book of Plato's dialogues or a treaty on social contract by Rousseau that a political crime like Gulag, whatever, will be committed. As we said it when I was young, from Plato to NATO line. The ordinary political policeman goes to secret organizations to arrest revolutionaries. The philosophical policeman goes to philosophical symposia to detect proponents of totality, and so on and so on. It's nice, provocative idea, this idea by Chesterton, but I think at one crucial point he is nonetheless wrong. We philosophers, at our best at least, when we are truly philosophers, we don't try to destroy the system. We just observe and bring out science features which demonstrate that the system is undermining its own premises, undercutting itself. This is why, permit me a brief detour through Hegel, this is why I like Hegel's notion of totality. It has nothing to do in Hegel, this notion, with this kind of a theological, large, encompassing unity. You know, like, this may appear to you something horrible, but if you look from it all, oh, it's just part of the divine harmony and so on. No, for Hegel, to locate a phenomenon into its totality does not mean to see the hidden harmony of the whole, but to include into a system all its distortions, antagonisms, inconsistencies, and so on and so on. This is for Hegel totality. For example, to make a quick jump to today's global politics. To observe capitalism as a totality doesn't mean that I should be telling you some nice fables about global market, bringing peace, prosperity, democracy, but to include into capitalism also phenomena, for example, like Congo. Take Congo, which is probably the hell on earth today. A country where, according to Time magazine report a couple of years ago, 5 million people died in the last years for unnatural reasons, a state which even doesn't function as a state. Look at it closely and you will see it's not some kind of Joseph Conrad heart of darkness out of our civilization. As such, it's fully included in global capitalism. Most of the metals, some components of our computers which make them workable come from Congo and so on and so on. So, to put it in more philosophical terms, thinking begins for Hegel when the distortion of a notion, like you have a certain notion, capitalism, democracy, and things are not well, so you say, no, they didn't apply it correctly, it's a distortion. The distortion of a notion becomes a distortion constitutive of this notion itself. You demonstrate how something which appears to be just a result of misapplication, incomplete realization of a project is a necessary constituent of this project. Again, back to Congo, the point is to demonstrate that it's not that some of us here in Scandinavia are happy to live in highly developed capitalism, others slowly will approach it. No, the point is that we here, Scandinavia and Congo, we are all parts of the same totality. What does this mean, this brief methodological introduction? How can we disengage, or rather acquire a minimal distance towards ideology today? Because we are being taught repeatedly ideology no longer exists, and so on and so on. To give you a good example of how ideology and technology can be deeply, almost inextricably mixed with each other, I would like to recall to you, maybe you've heard about it, a strange invention which was developed by Pranav Mistry, an Indian who works at MIT Media Lab. He developed a wearable that you can wear, gestural interface, again called Sixth Sense, 2 years ago, I think. Allegedly it works. I saw the presentation on TV and so on. What happens here? All you need is, the hardware you need is a small webcam which dangles from your neck, a pocket projector, and a mirror, all connected wirelessly to a smartphone in your pocket. That's all you need. The way it works is that you, as the user, you begin to handle objects and making gestures. The camera recognizes and tracks your hand gestures and the physical objects using computer vision-based techniques. Then the software processes the video stream data, reading it as a series of instructions, and it retrieves the appropriate information, texts, images, and so on, from the internet. The device then projects this information onto any physical surface which is available there, walls, physical objects, whatever. What does this mean? Here are some examples how it functions. Let's say in a bookstore, I pick up a book and just I hold it in front of me. Immediately, I see projected onto the book's cover the latest reviews, ratings, and so on. Because again, the camera processes the image is recognized, and then through the wireless connection, all the data are mobilized, they come back, they are projected. Or, if I want to check the time, I only draw the circle on my left wrist, and the projector displays a clock on my right arm. Or, when I hold my fingers at arm's length to form a square, the system recognizes this gesture as framing a scene, snaps a photo, and saves it. And so you see, you have this pseudo-transparency. It's a magic universe, almost. And of course, bad sexist as I am, from my, I admit it, male chauvinist perspective, I immediately imagined how such a device could transform sexual interaction. Like, I look at the woman and the projector immediately, it's immediately projected on her characteristics. No, easy to seduce, but likes jazz and Dostoevsky, good at fellatio, whatever you want. It's very practical. You just look at it, everything is. In this way, the entire world becomes a multi-touch surface, while the whole internet in the cloud, absent, is constantly mobilized to supply additional data. Pranav Mistry, the guy who invented this, emphasized the physical aspect of this interaction. Till now, internet and computers isolated the user from the surrounding environment. The archetypal internet user is a geek sitting alone in front of a screen, oblivious to the reality around him. With sixth sense, with these machines, I remain engaged in physical interaction with objects. The alternative, either physical reality or virtual screen world, is replaced by a direct interpenetration of the two. The projection of information directly onto the real objects with which I interact creates an almost magical, mystifying effect. Things appear to continuously reveal, or rather emanate, their own interpretation. Paradoxically, this means that the latest technological ideas bring us back to the pre-modern universe in which meaning resides in things themselves. The gap between reality and meaning, the defining feature of modernity, is undone. This is why sixth sense does not simply represent a radical break with our everyday experience. Rather, it openly stages what was always the case, and that's what I want to insist on. What shocked me with this invention is that at its most magic, it just brings out what we are all the time doing. Just replace the computer with the big stock of our ideological prejudices and so on and so on. To return to the consciously politically incorrect, bad taste example that I gave, forget about all this technology. If I am, I hope I'm not, who knows, if I am this kind of a male chauvinist sexist, isn't this effectively happening when I look at an attractive woman? Would she like to do this? Does she like that music or whatever? Or, to give you maybe a clearer example, isn't it that racism functions exactly like that? You see a person and the, as it were, ideological illusion of racism is that, of course, not in a literal projection, but in a projection which is all the more brutal, you see there all your ideological prejudices. For example, if you're anti-Semitic and the guy is a Jew and just innocently smiles, you see in this smile all the cunningness. Why is he friendly to me? What does he want from me? Money? Does he want to cheat? You know, so again, what I like here, this is typical of the practice of ideology, is how the more the experience is immediate, and you can celebrate this, like that guy Pranav Mistry does, as the end of this alienating Cartesian. Descartes is one of the bad guys that I like, you know, universe. I mean, he's good here to be blamed for everything. Al Gore even blamed Descartes in one of his earlier books for all the catastrophes of ecology, no, because instead of this, how should I call it, harmonious interpenetration between our universe and reality, we get a radical gap between our world of meaning and reality out there, and so on and so on. What we get here is an apparent return to pre-modernity, but nonetheless, which in a way is not simply to be condemned, because I think what is nice in this example is that it's not that it's a fake. Now, a traditional reactionary would have said, no, this is a technological fake. It's no longer a true, authentic, pre-modern universe. I claim, yes, it is a fake, but it is a fake which retroactively makes also the pre-modern experience something which was a fake.